Sydney Irene was born on August 21, 1993, in Broken Bow, Nebraska. Raised in Arcadia by her parents, George W. and Susie Loofe, Sydney and her family relocated to Nela around 2000. She was known for her exceptional fishing skills. Despite participating in basketball and golf during her school years, her sports activities were limited due to scoliosis, which she developed as a teenager. Following her graduation from nearby Oakdale High School in 2011, she found employment at a local hardware store on November 16, 2017. At the age of 24, Sydney was expected to work as a cashier at Menards in Lincoln, Nebraska, but she failed to appear for her shift and neglected to inform anyone of her absence. Concerned colleagues, friends, and family members tried to contact Sydney through calls and texts but received no response. Sydney's family relocated to Nela when she was in second grade. Her mother, Susie, worked as a special education teacher, while her father, George, served as a school principal. They maintained a close bond, and even after Sydney moved from Menards in Norfolk to the Lincoln branch, they made efforts to stay in touch regularly, often meeting for dinner. Sydney frequently visited home, including a trip on the weekend of November 10th, when Susie accompanied her back to Lincoln after dinner. Sydney had been struggling with depression and found her current medication ineffective, leading her to seek help from a new doctor who prescribed different medication. During the week of November 13th, Susie observed an improvement in Sydney's mood as she expressed a desire for change, including seeking a new job. However, when Sydney didn't arrive for work and her colleagues alerted her family, concerns heightened despite Sydney's recent positive demeanor. Sydney's parents visited her duplex apartment to find her missing, but her beloved cat Mimsy remained. Susie became immediately worried, knowing Sydney wouldn't leave her cat alone without food or water for long. Fearing the worst, they reported Sydney missing to the police. Earlier, the police had conducted a welfare check on Sydney at her colleague's request. Although nothing seemed out of place inside the apartment, except for the absence of water for Mimsy, the locked condition of the apartment, and Sydney's parked car outside indicated she hadn't simply stepped out briefly. Despite the absence of apparent signs of foul play, Sydney's family remained convinced that something was amiss, and the police took their concerns seriously. Susie informed the authorities that she suspected her daughter had gone on a date. On the evening of November 15th, she provided a screenshot of Sydney's Snapchat post featuring a photo of herself with the caption, "Ready for my date." Sydney's friends confirmed this, stating that she had plans to meet up with a woman named Audrey, whom she had connected with on Tinder. Upon examining Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace, the authorities identified a person they urgently needed to speak with. Sydney's phone had last pinged a cell tower in the Wilbur area, close to an apartment occupied by a woman named Bailey Boswell. Investigators believe that 26-year-old Bailey was the individual Sydney had met on the night of November 15th, using the name Audrey online. When contacted by the police, Bailey claimed that she and Sydney had been on 2 dates, with the second occurring on the night of November 15th, the evening before Sydney was reported missing. Bailey stated that she hadn't heard from Sydney since then and didn't know her whereabouts. The police intended to pursue further discussions with Bailey, but before they could do so, she fled with her 52-year-old boyfriend, Aubrey Trail. While evading authorities, Bailey and Aubrey Trail took to social media to post videos asserting their innocence regarding Sydney's disappearance and expressing hope for her safe return. Bailey claimed to have been on 2 dates with Sydney, stating that she had dropped her off at a friend's house and hadn't heard from her since. In one video, Bailey expressed her condolences to Sydney's family, adamantly denying any involvement in her disappearance and expressing her hope for Sydney's swift recovery.
Don't even know what else to say. I've been seeing all this stuff on the news presses and the magazines and the news, and I guess I just want the family to know that I'm truly sorry and I didn't have anything to do with this, and I hope that Sydney is found very soon. She is a sweet, amazing girl. I don't know. Babe, do you have anything else to say?
After several days of pursuit, law enforcement eventually located Bailey and Aubrey Trail in a hotel in Branson, Missouri. Despite their attempts to evade capture, they were successfully apprehended. Tragically, weeks after Sydney was reported missing, extensive analysis of Bailey's phone and location records led the police to discover Sydney's remains. Shockingly, her body had been dismembered, with her remains divided into 14 parts and placed in black plastic garbage bags scattered in ditches across Clay County. Notably, some of Sydney's organs, including her heart, were missing. Bailey and Aubrey faced charges of first-degree murder, improper disposal of human remains, and conspiracy to commit murder. While Bailey pleaded not guilty to all three charges, Aubrey pleaded not guilty to murder and conspiracy but admitted guilt to improper disposal of human remains. Despite being ordered to undergo separate trials, the prosecution presented essentially identical cases against both Bailey and Aubrey. The trials were held in Lexington, as the defense argued that the extensive publicity surrounding the case would prevent a fair trial in Wilbur. The prosecution asserted that Sydney was murdered through strangulation in a premeditated attack, meticulously planned by both Aubrey and Bailey to fulfill a depraved sexual fantasy. They contended that Aubrey and Bailey were leaders of a group seeking to recruit young women for sexual activities, with Bailey utilizing online platforms to find potential victims. Evidence presented to the jury indicated that Bailey initiated contact with Sydney via Tinder, leading to a date where they drove around, conversed, and consumed alcohol and prohibited substances. Bailey then arranged to meet Sydney again on the night of November 15th, a request which Sydney accepted. Bailey brought Sydney to their basement apartment in Wilbur, which they shared with Aubrey. According to the prosecution, upon Sydney's arrival, Bailey and Aubrey immediately attacked her, strangling her with an extension cord on the living room floor. They alleged that Sydney was killed within 24 minutes of entering the apartment. Following the murder, Bailey and Aubrey meticulously cleaned the apartment as part of their premeditated plan, argued the prosecution. They then proceeded to dismember Sydney and dispose of her remains in Clay County the following day, November 16th. Surveillance footage presented to the jury depicted Bailey and Aubrey purchasing tools for dismemberment and cleaning supplies on November 15th, mere hours before Sydney's murder. Testimony from their landlord, Jennifer Cole, revealed that on November 16th, upon entering the house, she detected the strong odor of bleach and Clorox, indicating extensive cleaning had taken place. Sydney's death was determined to be a homicide caused by strangulation, as revealed by the autopsy conducted on the recovered body parts. The examination indicated abrasions on Sydney's wrists, a head injury, torn ear lobes, as well as abrasions and bruises on her back. Defensive wounds suggested Sydney had fought for her life. Dr. Michelle Loofe, a forensic pathologist, testified in court that Sydney's cause of death was homicide by strangulation. Toxicology reports revealed the presence of antidepressant medication in Sydney's system. During the proceedings, it was noted that apart from the missing organs, the part of Sydney's body not recovered was her upper left arm, specifically the area above the elbow and below the shoulder. During the trial, Aubrey erupted in an outburst, vehemently proclaiming Bailey's innocence in Sydney's death. Aubrey then proceeded to inflict self-harm by slashing his throat 3 times with a razor blade. Following this incident, Aubrey did not attend the trial for a couple of weeks. When he finally reappeared in the courtroom during the defense stage, only to testify, he was wheeled in and remarked to the judge with a smirk, "I'm going to be good." It is uncommon for an accused individual to testify at their own trial due to the risks involved, such as providing too much information, struggling to answer questions effectively, or displaying hostility towards questioning attorneys, which could negatively impact the jury's perception. However, in this particular case, his decision to testify wasn't as unusual due to his extensive prior interactions with the police after his arrest. During initial police interviews following his arrest, Aubrey provided a peculiar narrative involving a purported sex cult he and Bailey were supposedly part of. He spoke of involvement in witchcraft, claimed to be a vampire capable of flight, and depicted himself as the leader of a sexual cult with witches among its members. According to his initial account, the witches would supposedly gain power through torturing and killing other women. Concerning Sydney's death, Aubrey claimed to have paid her $5,000 to participate in a sexual fantasy with two other women. He asserted that Sydney's death occurred accidentally during consensual sexual activity and admitted to disposing of her body. Aubrey further stated to the police that he dismembered Sydney's body as part of a ritual aligned with his religious beliefs. He claimed to have drained her blood to release her soul to the gods in a sacred location, and arranged her body parts to expedite her reincarnation process. During his testimony, he informed the jury that he and Bailey initially encountered Sydney in March 2017 and paid her to participate in their illicit activities due to her financial needs. He claimed they lost contact afterward, but in November 2017, Bailey sought to reignite their relationship and reached out to Sydney again. Aubrey asserted that Sydney, in need of money, agreed to meet him on November 15th, which is why he was at Menards that day. Aubrey claimed to have offered Sydney $5,000 to join their antique theft operation. Later that evening, the three of them engaged in sexual activities during which Sydney was accidentally asphyxiated with an extension cord they were using in a sexual game. Aubrey stated, "I don't know if Sydney had a seizure or what, but that's when she stopped breathing." He informed the court that there was no ceremonial aspect to the dismemberment of Sydney's body, dismissing any notions of witchcraft or vampires as untrue. He explained that he resorted to dismembering her because her body wouldn't fit in the car. When questioned about the tool he used, he described it as a curved saw akin to a hacksaw blade. Aubrey admitted to feeling panicked and subsequently disposed of her remains in a Clay County field at daybreak on November 16th. He justified his failure to seek assistance by expressing doubt that anyone would believe his account of accidental death. Aubrey acknowledged disposing of Sydney's body but maintained that her demise occurred accidentally during sexual activity involving an extension cord. During Bailey's trial, she vehemently denied any involvement in the events. Instead, her legal team argued that she herself was a victim of arbitrary actions. They portrayed her as a vulnerable young woman when she met Aubrey, emphasizing her isolated living situation and recent escape from an abusive relationship with her child's father while working as a waitress in Princeton, Missouri. The defense firmly asserted that Bailey played no part in Sydney's death or the disposal of her body. However, the prosecution countered this claim, presenting evidence that contradicted Bailey's innocence. They highlighted the proximity of a cell phone linked to Bailey's Tinder account to the location where Sydney's remains were discovered. Detailed analysis of Bailey's phone and location records ultimately aided law enforcement in locating Sydney's remains. The court also learned that it was Bailey who initiated contact with Sydney and arranged their meeting. She was the one who arrived at Sydney's duplex to pick her up on the evening of November 15th. Testimony from three other women who had been in relationships at different times with Aubrey and Bailey, all originating from Tinder, was presented to the jury. They testified that Bailey had contacted them on Tinder, engaging in sexual activities with both Bailey and Aubrey. One woman stated that she even traveled with them after their Tinder encounter. She claimed that Aubrey provided her with a $1,200 weekly allowance and invited her to join what he referred to as his cult. He described members of the group as witches and informed her that to join, she would need to participate in acts of torture and murder. He even suggested potential victims, including a woman they had met through Tinder. According to her testimony, Bailey was referred to as the queen within the group. Another woman provided testimony stating that Bailey frequently discussed her desire to break fingers and her fascination with dismembering bodies, expressing enjoyment in conversations about torture. All three women who testified emphasized that both Bailey and Aubrey actively engaged in discussions regarding torture and murder. Furthermore, the court was informed that Bailey was in Aubrey's company on the day Sydney was killed, during which they purchased tools such as a hacksaw, tin snips, and a utility knife from Home Depot together around noon that day. Bailey sent Sydney a text message inquiring about her day. Phone records and security footage confirmed that Bailey was in the Menards parking lot with Aubrey at the time she sent the Tinder message. Despite Sydney's employment at Menards, there was no indication that she was aware of Bailey's presence there. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney another Tinder message, informing her that she was at her apartment to pick her up. Despite Sydney's expectation of driving around on their date, phone records suggest that they instead went to the apartment where Bailey and Aubrey resided. Bailey's attorney contended that the evidence regarding Bailey indicated her involvement in purchasing bleach and trash bags for obvious use in disposing of Sydney's body, potentially making her culpable for aiding and abetting in the improper disposal of human remains. However, he urged the jury to consider whether this evidence was sufficient to establish aiding and abetting first-degree murder or conspiracy to commit murder. He implored the jury to concentrate solely on the evidence presented and not to be swayed by the graphic autopsy photos. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before reaching a decision to convict Aubrey Trail of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper disposal of human skeletal remains. Trail requested a new trial, which was denied by Judge Bailey Boswell, on the other hand, succeeded in her motion to change the venue, citing prejudice, and it was granted. However, in February 2020, the district judge recused herself from the case due to her involvement in Nebraska's execution protocol implementation in October 2020. A jury found Bailey Boswell guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper disposal of human remains. In June 2021, a panel of 3 judges reached a unanimous decision to condemn Aubrey Trail to the death penalty. Trail sought to advocate for himself during the appeal process, yet his plea was dismissed. Concurrently, Boswell was handed a life sentence following a judge's assessment that her conduct fell short of the necessary level of exceptional depravity to warrant a death sentence. What do you think of today's story? Write your opinion about this case in the comments. I thank you for your attention and recommend subscribing to the channel, as well as clicking on the bell to not miss new videos that are released daily. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. See you soon.